Mr. Chair, just I don't think we need a lot of excuses on ATIP. You know, part of a democracy is transparency, and so access to that information and sharing it with Canadians is critically important. So I'm hoping that the department and CAF are addressing this in the most serious manner, because the External Monitor and others have really been critical of national defence and getting back on ATIPs, including order paper questions back to us as parliamentarians. And if we're going to have a fully functional democracy, that information is critical. Now, going back to the Canfor Gen memo that both you, Mr. Matthews, and you, General Eyre, had put out about expensions, reductions in the department, and you're saying it's $1 billion. We already know that last year $2.5 billion lapsed in the budget. We know that year before that the government allowed $1.2 billion to lapse in the budget. Now we're going to cut it back another $1 billion. Now, the PBO just came out with his report and said that there is too much tail, not enough teeth in the Canadian Armed Forces, that only 31% of every dollar actually goes into military effect. So what are we going to do to make sure we have more teeth, less tail, keep the sharp end of the stick? You know, when you talk about where our troop numbers at, you're saying 10,500 in the queue getting trained. We're short, you know, it's just shy of 16,000 members. I'm hearing from reservists that they aren't getting their skills in their trades trained up fast enough. They're years behind, not months behind. What's going to give here on $1 billion this year? And how are we going to deal with the threat environment that we're in if we're going to continue to cut rather than invest in our Canadian Armed Forces?
Maybe I'll start, Mr. Chair. I suspect General Eyre will jump in as well. So the process to identify proposals for spending reductions, which will lead to, as the Chief said, nearly, I think it's $900 million and change, ramp up over 4 years. We have to prioritize those decisions so they have the least amount of impact possible, acknowledging that there will be impact. And so,
coming out of the forces.
The decisions have not yet been taken, but impacting, minimizing impact on military readiness has to be a driving force behind the decision, and that process is still underway. So,
I sure hope we're not going to hear stories of that. We can't afford to put the fuel in the tanks to train our guys in armor. We're not going to be able to put diesel in the ships that have the Navy go out there and training. We can't afford to do maintenance on our tanks, and they're going to continue to sit in depot and nobody taking a look at them. So I just say, we've got to make sure that we're continuing to move forward in training and operations and getting everybody up to skill. Talking about cybersecurity and the world that's there, and for both Madame Xavier and to the CDS and DND as well. When you look at what's happening with Five Eyes, with AUKUS in that second tier in the development, we know that they're looking at AWS for cloud computing and storage, and we know that we're looking at more quantum computing. That cybersecurity aspect is critical. Interoperability with our allies, particularly with the Americans, but also within Five Eyes, is key. What are we doing, and how are we moving faster so our allies are taking us serious?
So thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. And I would say that the alliance that we have with our Five Eyes, especially from a communications security establishment, is rock solid. And interoperability from that perspective is actually a big part of the foundation of how we work with our Five Eyes. Because we do share signals intelligence, for example, it is really important that when we do that work together, that delay in being able to share data or share intelligence is not the rationale. So interoperability is actually a very foundational element that we discuss on a regular basis and that we invest in as a Five Eyes, including in the cloud-based space that you're talking about.
Perhaps, I don't know if this question is for Mr. Matthews or General Eyre, but how many 155 shells are being produced in Canada right now per month?
Mr. Chair, first of all, not enough. Secondly, 3,000.
3,000 is the monthly.
That is my understanding.
Okay. Is that out of GDOTS?
GDOTS.
Okay. All right. So they are now producing shells. What is the production capability of that facility? Like what can we realistically get up to quickly?
Maybe I'll start, Mr. Chair, and the Chief will chime in. Conversation about upgrading production of ammunition, 155 or other. It's a long process, requires investment, and there are discussions underway about potentially investing to upgrade production, but it is not a quick fix.
Okay, why not? This is the hottest, perhaps the hottest military commodity in the world right now. Every allied military that fires 155 shells needs 155 shells. Why is there no urgency on getting the production ramped up?
So I think two things, Mr. Chair. Number one, and the Chief may have to help me here, there is variants of 155, and the production of 155 in Canada is not, I'll call it the most desirable variant. So when you talk about upgrading production, we're also talking about new machinery, et cetera, to make a different type of 155. And so those discussions are underway, but it's a pretty big investment. Chief can help me out with variants here.
No, Mr. Chair, you've identified an issue that I am extremely concerned about because it underpins our own lack of readiness in this area. And we do need a sense of urgency, more of a sense of urgency in this area. But along with increasing industrial capacity, we need the contracts that go along with that to be able to produce the ammunition, to get the additional production lines open, et cetera, et cetera. We have not produced one additional round of ammunition in this country since February of 22. So yes, this is something that greatly concerns me.
So to be clear for the record, the 3,000 per month is the same production as before the beginning of the war in Ukraine.
Yes, and I'll add those are the M107 variants. What we need are the M795 variants, which we do not have the production capability for in Canada yet.
Okay, I can't even...
I can get into I can geek out on the details with you if you want, but...
well, given that previous witnesses last week gave us almost no meaningful information, take half a minute for some of those details.
So the M107 variant is a shorter distance, so the range is shorter. The kill radius is less, and the accuracy is less. The M795 variants, which we consider the operational round, which we prefer to use in operations, has about a 5 kilometer longer range, more precise, and has a wider kill radius, if you will. That being said, the M107 will still work, but not as good as the 795, which we hope to retool to.
Is it not fair to say that literally every allied country is searching for this class of ammunition? How on earth could there not be contracts, given that there are decades of production are being expended very quickly in the war in Ukraine?
No, Mr. Chair, you are right. Every NATO Chiefs of Defense meeting I go to, this is an issue of discussion. Our allies are rightly very concerned about this, and we're all looking at ways of ramping up production. And it is of increasing concern because we take a look at the Russian reconstitution ability. They're actually reconstituting at a faster rate than we anticipated. And so in order to continue to, one, ensure that we've got our own proper stocks, and two, ensure that we can continue to support Ukraine in the long term, the accelerated production of artillery ammunition is extremely important.
Is there any possibility for Ukraine to win the war without some type of parity or some type of ability to compete with Russian production and expenditure of artillery?
You know, Mr. Chair, there are many pathways to victory, but as we take a look at the reliance of modern warfare, in fact, warfare for the past 150 years, artillery has been pretty key.
Thank you. Tanks. Once our battle tanks have fully deployed with the battle group commitment in Latvia and also with the tanks that have already been sent to Ukraine, how many tanks operational tanks are left for either further deployment or training?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to have to do some math here. So we started with 82 tanks. We donated 8 to Ukraine. We're deploying 22 to Latvia. And so the math, just very quickly here, doing it in my head. I've got the accountant sitting beside me here, 52.
Are those 52 tanks all operational, fit to either deploy or for use for training?
Mr. Chair, no. I don't know the
Okay,
rate off the top of my head. I do know what the overall serviceability rate of Army vehicles is, and it's not good. And it goes down to a shortage of spare parts, national procurement funds, and technicians.
Earlier, Minister Blair mentioned that he's building on the work of his predecessor, Minister Anand, and her suggestion was that we need to continue to build resources, especially in the area of personnel. So my concern is the discrepancy between numbers in an order paper question that we received back in April. So if we're talking numbers, based on the order paper question, we're about 8,000 personnel short for the regular force and 1,000 for the reserve force. But there's discrepancy because other numbers suggest that we're 16,000 personnel short with another 8,000 personnel short on the reserve side. So just looking through the numbers, are you able to clarify with us what the numbers are for the Canadian Army, the Royal Canadian Navy, the Royal Canadian Air Force, the Canadian Special Operation Forces Command, the Canadian Forces Intelligence Command? Because there's discrepancy, the numbers aren't adding up.
Mr. Chair, it's important to state that a guiding principle is truth has a date timestamp. And so what was true in one day will not necessarily be true the next day, especially with regarding numbers, personnel strengths. I can give you our numbers effective as of the 21st, actually as of the 31st of August for the Canadian Armed Forces. So the difference between our authorized strength and our total strength for the regular force is 7,862.
Okay.
For the reserve force, it is 7,605. You add that up, it's just shy of 16,000 short in the total force. The important figure on the regular force side is the difference between our trained effective establishment and our trained effective strength. So those that we can put out the door to do the job. And right now that number is 10,489 as of the end of last month. And so those people are in the training system, but they're not ready for operations yet. And so this is something that we watch very closely. It speaks to the need to continue to bring people in. I can talk about some of the successes we've had and how we're cautiously optimistic at this point, if you wish.
Perhaps I'll lead right into the next question. Back in February, earlier this year, I posed a question outlining the need for the retention of CAF from highly technical domains such as cyberspace, including the addition of 120 new military intelligence positions and 180 new civilian intelligence positions. And I asked if this goal had been effectively achieved and what are the numbers in this particular domain, if you're familiar with them. So we were hoping to get some of those numbers circled back. So I just wondered if you had those.
Mr. Chair, I don't have the exact numbers for those occupations, but those technical occupations are ones that we are very concerned about. They have highly marketable skills. There's a shortage across our country, and we see just the general labor shortage writ large in the country, especially skilled labor in those fields. It's hard to hold on to people. I am happy to report I got good news today. Our attrition rate overall is down to 7.1%. So back within historic norms. You know, for a while over the pandemic, we were up to 9.1, 9.2%, which was of concern. So this is, again, feeds into my narrative of being cautiously optimistic.
So the question I'd like to pose next is how much of that was relevant to letting people go with regards to COVID?
That is for this fiscal year, so 0.
Okay, fair enough.
Going back.
Sorry. Next question. So changing gears here, the government has recently announced budget cuts to the D&D. Given that discussion here today, we're talking personnel shortages are apparent, equipment shortages are more than clear and abundant. So how are the additional funding cuts going to impact the armed forces' ability to serve and protect Canadians?
Mr. Chair, there's no way that you can take almost $1 billion out of the defense budget and not have an impact. So this is something that we're wrestling with now. I had a very difficult session this afternoon with the commanders of the various services as we attempt to explain this to our people. Our people see the degrading, declining security situation around the world, and so trying to explain this to them is very difficult.